There's a question that Pakistan would desperately want the world to answer with a yes. If war comes, will Saudi Arabia fight for Pakistan? Because on August 7, in the holy city of Mecca, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey signed a defense agreement that contains a very powerful line. An armed attack on one will be treated as an attack on all. Sounds like NATO, doesn't it? An Islamic NATO, a new military axis, a powerful shield around Pakistan. And here's the catch. Will Saudi Arabia actually go to war for Pakistan? Or is this pact really about something far more complicated? Deterrence, diplomacy, intelligence, weapons, money, and strategic signaling. Because the biggest story in this particular agreement may not be what Saudi Arabia has promised. Pakistan. It may be what Saudi Arabia has not promised. The Mecca Joint Defense Agreement is undoubtedly a major geopolitical development. There are reports that 3 countries have committed to mutual defense while also planning deeper political and military coordination, joint exercises and cooperation in areas including drones, electronic warfare, cyber capabilities, and defense technology. And that is where the Saudi-Pakistan relationship gets fascinating, because Pakistan and Saudi Arabia are not new friends. This relationship goes back decades. Pakistan has trained Saudi forces. Pakistani troops have served in Saudi Arabia. The two militaries have maintained close defense cooperation since the 1960s. And in 2025, Islamabad and Riyadh formalized their bilateral defense relationship even further. So from Islamabad's perspective, this isn't some overnight friendship. It is the formalization of a relationship that has been building for generations now. But the history also tells us something else. Saudi friendship does not automatically mean Saudi military intervention. Remember 2015? Saudi Arabia was fighting a brutal war in Yemen. Riyadh wanted Pakistan to participate in the Saudi-led military campaign. But Pakistan's parliament refused to send troops into the conflict. The moment exposed the uncomfortable reality behind the so-called brotherhood in this relationship. When national interests collide with strategic friendships, countries choose national interests, and Saudi Arabia is also no different. In fact, perhaps more than anyone else, Saudi Arabia today is playing the game of strategic balancing, because Riyadh has a very important relationship with another country, India. And this is where the Mecca Pact actually becomes particularly interesting for New Delhi. Saudi Arabia is not simply Pakistan's friend, it is also a major partner for India. India buys enormous quantities of energy from the Gulf. Indian companies are looking towards Saudi investment. Saudi sovereign capital is increasingly important to India's economic ambitions. And as Riyadh pursues Vision 2030, India is becoming an increasingly important part of its economic and strategic calculations. So ask yourself, would Mohammed bin Salman really risk a relationship worth billions of dollars to fight India's war for Pakistan? That is the million-dollar question. And the answer, at least for now, appears to be not so fast. Because Saudi Arabia has spent years transforming its foreign policy. It is no longer interested in simply choosing one camp and remaining loyal to it. Riyadh wants options. It wants Washington, it wants Beijing, it wants Moscow, it wants New Delhi, it definitely wants Ankara, it wants Islamabad, and incredibly, it has even maintained channels with Tehran. This is not ideological foreign policy, this is very transactional. And former Indian ambassador Navdeep Suri has long described Saudi Arabia's approach as one of the multi-alignment and strategic autonomy. And that is exactly why the phrase Islamic NATO needs to be treated very carefully. Yes, the comparison is dramatic, and yes, the language of the collective defense sounds supremely powerful. Yes, Pakistan, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia together represent an extraordinary combination of military experience, technology, money, and strategic geography. But these 3 countries don't actually see the world in exactly the same way. Pakistan's biggest security concerns are India and Afghanistan. Turkey is a regional military power operating across multiple theatres, from Caucasus to the Middle East and far beyond. Saudi Arabia's primary concerns are the Gulf, energy infra, Iran, Yemen, and the security of its own territory. So there is no single enemy, no single battlefield, and no single strategic doctrine. And perhaps the most importantly, no single definition of what constitutes as an attack. And that could determine the future of this particular pact. Now imagine tomorrow there is a military confrontation between India and Pakistan. Would a Pakistani request for assistance automatically trigger Saudi military intervention? The agreement does not publicly spell out an automatic NATO-style military response. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar has stressed that the pact is purely defensive and not directed against any particular country. So does collective defense means Saudi fighter jets, Saudi missiles, Saudi troops, or does it mean intelligence, air defense coordinations, weapons, logistics, diplomatic cover, financial assistance? There's a massive difference between those possibilities. And that particular difference is precisely where Saudi Arabia has room to maneuver. Because Riyadh can support Pakistan without necessarily going to war for Pakistan. And that may actually be the genius of this arrangement. Saudi Arabia gets to strengthen Pakistan. Turkey gets to expand its regional footprint. Pakistan gets diplomatic and military depth. And all three can claim they are building a defensive security framework without openly declaring a new war bloc. But there is another major player watching this very carefully: India. For New Delhi, the Mecca Pact should neither trigger nor panic nor be dismissed as empty symbolism, because Pakistan has just acquired a more formalized security relationship with two major regional powers. Turkey has already been a strong political and defense partner of Pakistan for the longest time, and Saudi Arabia brings something different to the table: money, energy, influence, regional access, and enormous diplomatic weight. So even if Saudi troops never enter a Pakistan conflict, Riyadh could still matter enormously. Imagine Pakistan receiving advanced equipment. Imagine expanded intelligence sharing. Imagine greater access to Saudi's financial resources. Imagine Turkish drones and defense technology becoming more deeply integrated with Pakistani military. Imagine coordinated diplomatic positions in international forums. None of them requires a Saudi soldier to cross a border. And that is exactly why the real threat, if you want to call it that, may not be an army marching into the battle. It may be Pakistan becoming harder to isolate. That is the strategic calculation India has to make. But there is also a fascinating contradiction here. Saudi Arabia may also have signed a defense pact with Pakistan, yet its relationship with India is not disappearing. Quite the opposite, actually. And that means Riyadh could find itself in an extraordinary position: security partner of Pakistan, economic partner of India, strategic partner of Turkey, long-standing partner of the US, and a country trying to manage an increasingly dangerous relationship with Iran. This is not an alliance system built around loyalty. It is an alliance system built around leverage. And that brings us back to the original question: how far is Saudi Arabia really willing to go for Pakistan? The answer may be far enough to make Pakistan feel secure, but not far enough to destroy Saudi Arabia's relationship with India. Far enough to provide weapons, intelligence, and diplomatic support, but perhaps not far enough to launch a war that damages Vision 2030. Far enough to strengthen Pakistan's deterrence, but perhaps not far enough to fight Islamabad's battles for it. And that particular distinction is absolutely crucial, because the Mecca Pact may not be powerful precisely because it leaves some things deliberately ambiguous. Ambiguity creates deterrence. If an adversary doesn't know what response will follow an attack, it has to calculate the risk. But ambiguity also creates uncertainty among allies. And someday in a real crisis, that uncertainty will be tested, and that is when we will find out whether the Mecca Pact is truly a military alliance or a very sophisticated instrument of geopolitical signaling. For Pakistan, this is unquestionably a diplomatic victory. Islamabad has managed to put itself at the center of a new regional security conversation. For Turkey, it is another opportunity to project power far beyond its immediate neighborhood. And for Saudi Arabia, it is a hedge against the uncertain regional order and against over-dependence on any one single external security guarantor. And for India, it is a reminder that strategic map around India is changing. But India's response cannot simply be fear of a so-called Islamic NATO. India's answer has to be engagement, deeper ties with Riyadh, stronger relations with Ankara wherever possible, greater integration with Gulf economies, more defense preparedness, and above all of it, a recognition that countries like Saudi Arabia will increasingly pursue multi-alignment, not permanent alignment. Because today's friend can definitely be tomorrow's partner, and tomorrow's partner can still be today's competitor, and that is very much the brutal reality of geopolitics. And in geopolitics, sometimes the threat of collective action can be just as powerful as collective action itself. The Mecca Pact, therefore, may not be the birth of an Islamic NATO. It may be something more modern, more flexible, more transactional, and potentially far more difficult to predict. A security partnership where everything has something to gain and nobody has completely revealed how far they are willing to go. And until the real crisis tests this promise, one question will continue to hang over Islamabad, Riyadh, and New Delhi alike. When the moment really comes, will Saudi stand beside Pakistan, or will national interest stand in midfield? Keep on following the developments. This is me, Riyadh, signing off for Times Now Digital.